Hello, hello, JJ Geronimo here today, and I am with just an absolutely lovely soul, Lori Rivers. I'm so honored that you joined me today. Thank you.
Oh, the honor's mine. Thank you for having me.
So I obviously have been going to astrologers and mediums for
Hmm
a large part of my
hmm
life. My mom started taking
hmm
me to Lily Dale when I was 14.
Oh, wonderful.
I know I'm so lucky that that was
Hmm
part of my life and part of my
Yeah.
upbringing.
Very
Robert
fortunate.
Coons.
Oh,
Yeah, Robert
wow.
Coons was our
Nice.
guy. Yes.
I love
S-
that.
So tell us a little bit, about progressive evolutionary astrology. What is it and how did this come to you?
Well, first of all, I'm a classically trained astrologer. So I started out the way almost everybody starts out wondering, what was this thing? And I didn't even go searching. It fell into me. And then through many years of study, because I've been at this since 1995, next year is my 30th year, and I've been a professional since 98. And so I did a lot of research, and I came to astrology both as a political analyst and as a cultural anthropologist. So I've always been interested in what made people tick. Even when I was a kid, I was into reading like Manly P. Hall and Napoleon Hill when I was like 10, 11 years old. So it's not a big surprise. I've had a wild and woolly life, and the teachers have come to me. They have shown up. They're like, I'm going to teach you. And I'd be like, we'll see if I want to do it. I'd be like, maybe I'll prove it wrong. But with progressive evolutionary astrology, there is a branch of astrology called evolutionary astrology, and it was spearheaded by Jeffrey Wolf Green and Stephen Forrest, who are amazing astrologers. I studied with Jeffrey Wolf Green, but I found often in all realms of astrology the language to be somewhat problematic because it was based on the current cultural lens with patriarchal thinking. Okay. So this planet is strong and this is weak. And if this planet is in this sign, it's in fall and detriment. Instead of looking at things from an energetical point of view, like from a physics point of view. And I know people are like, oh man, that's science. But science and spirituality are married. And we're going to see that more and more as we move into the next 20 years. Is that if you look at quantum mechanics, and I don't know about you, I was forced to take a class in college on this back in 1989 when it wasn't part of the popular zeitgeist. And it melted my brain and it changed it forever. And that's what made me start looking at how we communicate astrology in a different way. Instead of being fated and destined to always struggle, to always meet challenges, to understand that those things we see that might be problematic in traditional astrology are actually our superpowers.
I
Okay.
love that. I
Yes.
love
And they're
it.
the gateway to healing. So we don't choose our trauma in this life. I do not believe that. In fact, that was when I realized I could heal from trauma, understanding myself, um, and using astrology as a tool for that. It verified something I had believed since I was a teenager, that what had happened to me did not forever doom me, even though I'd been told that by psychologists. I was like, but it doesn't make sense. It's not organic. It's not an organic problem. It should be fixable. And anyway, communicating in different ways and looking at things in an energetical perspective, we don't choose the trauma, but we know it's very likely. And so those things that indicate the challenges also show, again, the tool for healing. And when you can flip the narrative, and that's why I call it progressive evolutionary astrology, and saying, instead of saying men are men and women are women, and this planet is always strong, and this is the one that dooms you, and it's the destroyer and the restrictions. And if we can understand that consciousness is a spectrum, and the planets represent in their placements in your birth chart, the entire spectrum of how your consciousness can be from reactive to responsive and everything in between. And understanding we're not here for crime and punishment or reward. We're here for experiences.
Yes, I'm with you. I think we've all agreed to come down for very specific experiences to help us
Mhm.
grow. But let me
Absolutely.
dive it back into this because I love to learn and I love to just kind
Hmm.
of understand the dynamics.
Hmm.
So I'm going to do some generalities. So,
Absolutely.
when we say, Jupiter's a lucky planet and Saturn is a hurdle planet, but you're
Yeah.
saying progressive evolutionary astrology
Hmm.
takes the energy of the planet as a whole and
Yeah.
doesn't like point, like almost have like a pin or a top of the pencil, right? The point of the pencil. Like,
So I would let me describe Jupiter to
yes.
you. It's a magnifying glass.
Mm,
It's a magnifying glass. It because we still work off the interpretation. So what does Jupiter do? It expands. Luck is what you make it. You can have an opportunity thrown in front of you and you can walk right by it. Your guides are handing you goodies all all day long, every day. You are constantly encouraged by your spirit team, your energetical guides, however you want to call it. But if you've not got the lens to see it, then that opportunity might be a lot of stress until you cry uncle and change your perspective. So Jupiter is more, is more, is more. Because I think when we use the word luck, we think of winning the lottery or meeting
mm.
Mr. Right or Mrs. Wonderful or having, but sometimes our best fortune happens through a challenge. And Jupiter will exacerbate a challenge depending on where it's making aspect until you say, you know what? The payoff isn't working in this. I need to make a change. So sometimes a rock bottom can happen when we have a Jupiter transit.
Isn't that the truth?
And
Yes, yes.
Saturn isn't just restriction, it's structure. Saturn rules the bones. That's traditional astrology. See, progressive evolutionary astrology doesn't negate traditional astrology, it widens the language so that we're opening our perspective a little bit, right? So without our bones, we're just a pile of goo. We need our bones to have range of motion. If you need an outline, if you're going to pour concrete, what do you need? You need a frame. You
Right, the
can't just
forms.
put yeah. So Saturn gives us form and structure, but we don't like being told what to do. It's but it's our own authority. When you learn how to wield your inner authority, it doesn't really matter what's going on in the outside world. You could have somebody who's very authoritarian. They can't get you here. And if you have a structured mind, then you can work through solutions, right? But it takes a maturity, and maturation is painful.
Yes, it is. And it's
Growing up
hard
is hard.
to. Yes, I just am over 50 now, and I have to say, like, that I
Hmm.
really am learning to manage and maintain a certain
Yeah,
frequency,
yeah,
which is very trying at times because I
yeah.
have pokers all outside me
Hmm.
poking me often, and I
Of
just,
course,
yes, and
it's
it's,
mastery. They're
it's
your
that pull.
partners. Hmm.
Mhm.
They're your
So
partners.
So I'm having a call after this, and I say, okay,
Hmm.
well, I was meeting with Laurie Rivers, and she does progressive evolutionary astrology.
Hmm.
And the person on the other side of the phone says, I know what astrology is, but what is progressive evolutionary? So, how do you explain to somebody that's had an astrology reading of
Hmm.
what the delta is, or what is the ability or offering that is beyond what they're used to?
It widens the lens for self-actualization. It helps you understand yourself at a deeper, more integrated soul level.
Mm.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so if someone says, "Well, I've done that with human design or I've done that with gene keys," how do you think this
Okay.
is different?
They're different modalities. And
Yes.
honestly, I think it depends on the practitioner. It's not the
Mm,
modality, it's the practitioner because we're
mhm.
interpreting. So, progressive evolutionary astrology, it's not a different kind of astrology. It's how it's interpreted, it's the language. Okay. And so it's more of a focus on a forward moving pathway instead of a past focus.
I see.
So,
That
just kind of
makes sense.
like if you go to somebody for um, let's say you're trying to make life decisions, something big has happened, or you're about to make a move, because I integrate everything. I don't see anything as not spiritual. Business is spiritual, politics are spiritual, the human experience is spiritual and sacred, all of it, even the messy bits. And so if somebody's coming to me because they're looking to sell their business, or they're wanting to make a change of some kind, maybe it's a divorce, maybe it's a marriage, maybe they're getting ready to start a family. People come to me for all kinds of reasons. The difference is in how we focus things. It's not about what's happened to you. It's not about being fated. It's about grabbing your agency as a sovereign being and learning how to work within the spectrum of yourself, knowing you are never stuck. Even when you're stuck, you're never stuck. You have decisions you can make, and we work with your own bandwidth. Okay, so a spectrum is within a container. So we synthesize the chart. And any good astrologer, regardless of how they describe themselves, if they're doing a reading, should be synthesizing the chart. There's no such thing as a bad placement, in my opinion. There's no one part of the chart that's more important or less important. There are no empty spaces. And what there is lack of experience, because a really good traditional astrologer is going to synthesize the chart too. It's how we describe it. So, if that makes sense.
Oh boy, does it. Oh boy, does it. Because it wasn't when I first had my birth chart really read,
Mhm.
probably just before maybe 2019 or so.
Mhm.
It was so telling to me. I mean, one of the things that I love talking about deep stuff. I'm not a surface
Mhm.
talker, and I like
Right.
getting into stuff that doesn't work
Mhm.
or really kind of
Mhm.
uncomfortable conversation. So when I learned
Mhm.
that my son was in the eighth house, I was like, yeah, that
Beautiful.
really
Yeah,
helps
that
me.
yeah, that energizes you. So the sun,
Yeah.
here's an example. I describe the sun, and I'm not the only person who does.
Yeah.
Um, it's your animating force. It's your spark of life. It's not your personality. The whole chart represents you. Human beings are not cardboard cutouts and two-dimensional beings. It is your animating spark of life. So if you've ever, and this is going to be a little morbid, but if you've ever seen something that was once alive and is no longer living to our perspective on the physical plane, the animus has extinguished, or the spark of life has extinguished in that physical vehicle, whether it's a plant, a bird, a person. So we want to know what energizes us and what depletes us. So shallow surface level stuff makes you tired. Deep stuff keeps you up all night and sends you down rabbit holes, right?
Yes, completely. And I
Mhm.
feel
Yeah,
like had I known that early in my career, I could have
yeah.
really leaned more into that
Mhm,
and
mhm.
taken roles associated with that
Yeah,
type of work.
yeah,
And then,
yeah.
my son is in Sagittarius, so I am a
Oh,
seeker. So
yeah,
it's such a
absolutely.
great it really
Mhm.
I always say coaches should know astrology because how do
Yeah,
you coach
absolutely.
somebody if
Right.
you don't know who they are?
Well, and I think astrologers should be coaches. That's one of the
Yes.
things I did in my career, is beyond being a very good astrologer. What we didn't get taught, and most astrology trainings don't teach this. I work with my advanced students to know these things, but you didn't learn how to run a session. You didn't learn how to speak it, and so there's this drive to prove accuracy, and I end up getting people who have been scared to death by poorly communicated astrology. And so I took coach training up to an advanced level. And I did that because I wanted to be a better server of humans. Okay. So it isn't so much about being, I know I'm accurate. I know I'm a good astrologer, whether I'm doing mundane astrology and making predictions, which is different than dealing with human beings with agency, or I'm working with, like I said, business owners, college students. I love it when I get the college kids in, because I get to help them, really lean in, and they get what we didn't get as young people. Um, but coach training, or like therapists, if somebody comes from a therapeutic background, that gives you a much better way of working with people. And so I always say, study lots of things as an astrologer because it's a language, right? So the more background knowledge you have and the things you like, I always tell people, don't just study stuff to study it. You got to like it. And then you pair it together, and all those little symbols represent hundreds of thousands of options. And you work from your knowledge base and then get the professional development, whatever that might be, to make you better at working with clients so that you're not triggering them. I did as a very young beginning professional. It was the late 90s, right? There was no trauma informed and proving I knew what I was doing. These poor people's eyes would be this big. And now what I wouldn't do was tell them they were a hot mess or screwed or whatever. I'd be like, whoa, but this was the trauma. And I describe it in detail. And at that point, I lost them. I couldn't help them because I triggered them.
Yeah.
And I felt so bad. And I was like, because I had experienced a lot of trauma. So I had a really high threshold for it. And I was like, well, it wasn't that bad. Well, to them it was. And so I delved more into astrology. That's one of the reasons I studied with Jeffrey Wolf Green, is that was part of what evolutionary astrology was about, was like finding the soul purpose in our experiences. And then I was like, I still need a better delivery. So, when you're dealing with somebody who's an actual professional, they invest in their skills, whatever it is, whether it's a yoga teacher, a podcaster, a healer, you want people who have worked and studied beyond just a singular subject.
I think this is so lovely to hear because for people that might have only visited an astrologer once or twice, like we
Mm-hmm.
all work on our skills. And, I
Yes.
do a lot of public speaking. And I think
Mm-hmm.
the first few times I did it, I had like note cards and I was
Right.
checking them. And,
Oh,
I
sure.
had to learn how to deliver
Mm-hmm.
a message to a large audience from the
Mm-hmm.
stage and give them tools that they can walk away so they can empower themselves. And I think whether you're, like
Absolutely.
you said, an astrologer, a teacher, you're doing speaking, we've
Mm-hmm.
all fumbled through the process of
Oh,
figuring out
yes.
how do we best serve.
Yeah, yeah. And that's one of the things like I tell my students, because they'll be like, because I can look at a chart and just read the chart without studying at this point. 30
Sure.
years in, hundreds of thousands of charts, the way my brain works, there's a lot of factors. And then I'll have students who are like, why can't I get it? And I'm like, I didn't get it this way when I was at your stage either.
Yes.
Astrology is not a gift at all. It's a field of study. It has no one has ever been born automatically knowing astrology. Nobody. You have to study it. It is like anthropology or psychology. You might have a proclivity for it. Oh, we have a little guest. Sorry. This
Oh,
is my
hello.
grand dog. My people know her very well. She thinks I'm talking to her, so she's coming. Yeah, I know. You're the star. Okay, this is Oda. So
Oh, I love how animals like validate the message. They come
right.
in and like, I feel loved by this message.
Right. Absolutely.
Well, let's
Absolutely.
talk
So,
about, I want to talk a little bit on what you think is ahead for humanity because, you're known for your accuracy and politics and
mhm,
weather and
mhm,
earthquakes
mhm,
and, all your
mhm.
links are below so people can check
Thank
out your
you.
work and
Mhm,
follow you, sign up for a session with you if they're at a
mhm,
crossroads or they're really wanting
mhm,
to look at
mhm.
the
Up.
opportunity for what is
Mhm,
ahead.
mhm.
What do you think is on the horizon for humanity?
It's kind of a loaded question.
Well, just a
It
couple
is.
minute
It's
answer. Yes.
right. So again, consciousness is a wide spectrum. For those who have had to, let's say, struggle in life, those who have been through some things, people who've had to MacGyver it, for those of us over 50, you're going to be okay. For people who are overly attached to convenience, there's going to be some rude awakenings as we move forward over the next couple of years because we're shifting the balance. I have great hope for humanity as a whole. And I think next year, for those people who are in tune, listening to their guidance, And that's kind of also a loaded phrase because guidance isn't always loud the way the movies make it out to be. But it could be a repetitive thought, not an anxious thought, just this like, go to the store, go get ice cream, go call Joe. That can be your guidance, and it'd be like, why do I need to do this? Why am I being urged to do that? Well, there might be a really good reason. You'll find out if you do it. So if you're tuning in and listening to your instinct, because intuition is without emotion, instinct has that's that gut feeling. We're animals. We have instincts. It's just so arrogant to think that we don't, right? We are mammals. And so if you get your spidey senses up, or the hair on the back of your neck comes up, or you get I think I should go somewhere this weekend, listen to that, because we have some extreme, on one hand, extreme weather events on the horizon. On a spiritual level, we're going to see an awakening like we've never, ever seen. I think we're going to see people with collective vision. I think we're going to have people, like 2020 wasn't really an awakening. People woke up to the society and culture. The spiritual side wakes up. Now, you're going to see based on your beliefs, because our minds and our brains, our background knowledge is what is the filter for the interpretation of energy. So it's always funny when you get a bunch of clairvoyants together, right? And somebody will say, well, I see a fairy. And somebody said, oh, no, it's not a fairy. I see an angel. And the person, no, I see a blob of energy. They're all right. Not one of them is wrong. They're seeing it through their lens. Everybody's perception is unique and individual, and it's based on your studies. That's why it's important to really study a bunch of different things. So some people might see the Virgin Mary. Other people might see Ganesh. Other people might see a Mahdi. Other people may see fairies. Other people might see leprechauns. And other people may just see bandwidths of energy. And we're going to find out how interconnected we are. And awakenings usually happen because there's big events that shock people awake. So people who are experienced healers, practitioners, astrologers, mediums, anybody who's got any discipline at all, and discipline being a study, are up on deck in a really big way in 2025. So I just did my 2025 predictions. It's a wild year. It's a year metaphysicians have been looking forward to. And what's interesting, even in organized religion, it's considered an important year. So it's coming from the metaphysics. It's coming from organized religion. It's a big year. And it plants a seed for our evolutionary growth. We're coming back into connectivity with our planet instead of feeling separated from it. The great illusion will be dispelled for many, but I'm going to give a caveat. You wake up every single day of your life. What do you do with your awakeness? Because that's what matters. Do you roll over and go back to sleep? Do you go have your coffee, your matcha, your tea, your water, whatever you're drinking? Because the universe honestly really doesn't care what you have as your beverage of choice in the morning. It really doesn't. But what do you do after that? Do you go back into your old habits? And a lot of people who have left various forms of spirituality, religion, etc., the deconstruction process takes a lot longer than, oh, that's bad, because there's a lot of things we have to unpack. And so there will be a lot of newly awakened people who are a little bit like converts, and they'll start proselytizing. Don't just believe everybody who says they saw X, Y, and Z and think theirs is the only truth. Because the more you get into this, the more you realize the truth is a lot bigger than anyone's set of perceptions. And maybe take a good listening ear.
I love that, Laurie. That's just so magical. And I think it gives permission to
Mm-hmm.
so many to lean into what is calling them,
Mm-hmm.
be aware of what you are experiencing, and
Mm-hmm.
really reflect on how you're showing up, because it
Yeah.
really does come back to us. You can
Yes.
have all the gifts in the world, but it
Mhm.
really is up to you.
Yeah. Yeah. It's what you do with them. You can be a great
Mm.
singer, and it may not be your passion, and it's okay. Just because you're good at something doesn't mean you need to do it. Just because you have healing hands doesn't mean you have to go heal everybody. It's not your
Mm.
obligation. It might be the catalyst to a whole nother thing. That's your calling. And that's my job. My job is to help people really understand their calling, and then like help them plot the route to moving into that with confidence, diminishing the imposter syndrome, diminishing the old social conditioning, like if I get too big I'm a target, you know, that type of thing. So
I love that. I love that. Well, as I mentioned, your links are below, but I want
thank
to
you.
just give you a minute to share what's on the horizon for you and what's really unfolding. I mean, you've been doing this for 3 decades. You have a fabulous
Hmm.
podcast, the
Thank
Awaken
you.
Space Astrology podcast.
Hmm.
So, what's on the horizon for Laurie Rivers?
Oh gosh. Well, I have a mystery school, and I
Mm.
developed this curriculum. Actually, it was a download. Okay. 2012. July of 2012. It's been 12 years. And 2012 was another one of those years that
Yes,
was a
it
big
was.
awakening year. And it was a weekend in July. And all of a sudden, this information started flooding in. Now, separately, as from an astrologer, I am a channel. I am psychic. I was born psychic. I never really got to be 100% asleep, which sounds great. It wasn't. Um, really wasn't. It was hard, but especially as a kid. Um, but in 2012, this massive download hit me, and I looked like the guy from Close Encounters of the Third Kind, where he builds the mashed potato tower. Doo, 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 doo. And I filled up a 5 subject notebook over the weekend. And it was weird. It was like auto, and I don't do automatic writing. That's not something that's in. So that's why I knew it was something, because my hand just could not stop. It was chemical formulas. I'm not a chemist. I'm not a mathematician. And there's math. I was writing like biology stuff, and then there was business stuff, and then there was political stuff, and it was just very big, bigger than I could handle in that moment. And I was like, what am I supposed to do with this? Why? Obviously, it came into me. There must be something I must do. And I lived on an island. I knew nobody. I'd been stuck on that island for like, I don't know, like, well, almost 11 years at that point. I had no network. I had the internet, you know, but that was it. And then all of a sudden, it started to morph into a program, and it's a framework, and it is to serve this time. And it took me a long time to understand. I mean, oh, it just wasn't time yet. That's why it's been plugging along. And I created a meeting format and a framework for people to self actualize, meaning realize the self without dogma, to be able to, it circumvents cognitive dissonance. So it's not challenging your beliefs. Nobody's asking you to even question your beliefs, not directly. It does, but in a sneaky way. And you get to unpack what's really important to you, what energizes you, gives you discipline. So a lot of people didn't have the benefit of like having music lessons as a kid or being in a sport as a kid, which gives you a mental framework for reiterative training, which helps build critical thinking. And this helps build that no matter how old you are. It's been tested on hundreds of people around the world, multiple cultures. And I started with what some people would consider the least likely to succeed. Not from my judgment. I was looking at society, because I was like, anybody can take a high performer and help them do better. How do we help people who haven't had that advantage? And so I have that right now just through my Patreon. I tried to make it like, it went through so many incarnations, and it's time. So that's what I'm starting to put my focus on now. And is it astrological? Oh, sure. There's astrology behind it, but you don't have to know. It's not really the focus. It's the application of astrology without having to have 30 years of study.
That's brilliant. That's
Yeah,
brilliant. And it gives people a playbook. I think that's what people
yeah,
need is a
yeah,
playbook of how
yes,
to
yeah,
materialize or
yeah,
create or lean into
yeah.
a bigger version of what is possible.
Absolutely. And to know what's your enough, what's your why, what really
Yes.
matters to you, and without having somebody else define that. But and many
Absolutely.
of us, especially women or people socialized as women who have been moms and wives and sisters and daughters and mothers and men to a degree, but in a different way. But
Yes.
women especially don't really get the opportunity to know what they want.
Yes. Well, I love that. We will include that link below. Having this conversation with you is so fulfilling, and I just love your journey and what
Thank
you're
you.
offering the world because we need it now more than ever. And I feel like this is the time that people
Yeah.
have to be activated in
Yes.
ways that they can expand the work they're here to do.
100%. Yeah. Everybody's up on deck.
That's
Mhm,
right. That's right. And we're so
mhm.
honored for you to join us in our conversation and educate us on progressive evolutionary astrology. So thank you so much, Laurie Rivers. Be sure to check out her links, and we'll include your new links that you're going to offer. And I think for many of us, it's just a great way to actualize what is possible.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me, JJ. Mwah.
Thank you. Mwah. Have a great day, everyone, and we will talk to you soon.